Welcome, everybody, to another episode of From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm thrilled today to have our first return guest, I guess, except for myself, but uh, Matt Izzo. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back, Jamie. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm really excited. I'm not just saying that. I'm very excited to have you on. I follow you on Twitter. You are one of my favorite follows on Twitter, favorite follows online, period. You're just so positive and just so many things I could say that we've never met in person, but you've actually had just an inspiring kind of impact on me in the short time we've known each other. So,
Thanks.
um,
I appreciate that. I try to build a community on my Twitter. It's at Matt Izzo, Mattizzo, and I try to just be supportive and uplifting. There's so much negativity online and all that stuff, but I
yeah,
try not to focus on that sort of thing. And I just try to keep things positive, but I try to keep things real too, right? I don't
yeah.
want to be a Pollyanna, right? But I think it's best to tend to look at things from an optimistic perspective, right?
No, that's a great way to put it. And you certainly, as anyone whose audience grows and your following grows, you're going to have detractors and naysayers, and you've had your share of those. And we don't need to focus on that, but I just love the way that you handle it. It's so just positive and it's you can't please everybody. There's just
Um,
it's and if you are pleasing everyone, you're probably doing something wrong. And I just love your approach. I
right.
know people will say, oh, you brag all the time, or like, this whatever. And it's like, no, I can tell just from following you, you're a genuine person. You're just trying to support and trying to promote positivity and trying to lift people up. So
That's it, man. And people do that, and I try to make it a teaching moment, right? I don't take it personally.
yeah,
There was someone the other day who felt the need to like put a picture of himself up without a shirt on of me and show how much more muscular he was, right?
right.
And I offered to him, obviously, before I blocked him, I offered him the idea that, like, you might be doing this because you have a lot of suppressed and repressed insecurity about yourself. And, your actions really
Sure.
have nothing to do with me. And, maybe you should take a look into the mirror. And I'm not
Right.
necessarily expecting him to just apologize and have an epiphany on the spot. But
Sure.
I think that by planting the idea in his head, right, you just plant a seed and you don't know where that's going to go and, where that's going to lead someone 5, 10,
Right.
15 years down the road. So I try to see it as a teaching moment and not take it personally.
Yeah. Well, I was telling my wife actually the last night. I was like, he's only solidifying his base of followers by being you're sticking to his principles and being uplifting and supportive. But we can chat offline about all that. So for the listeners out there, first of all, I recommend you go back and listen to the first episode with Matt. Where we really went into a deep dive about Matt, about your history of being overweight, and we'll hit on this and a lot of the emotional baggage I think that was related to that, if not the cause of that. But for the listeners out there who have no idea who are you and what are you up to today?
Yeah, so I'm 40 years old and I spent most of my life, being obese with some, depression issues, self-image issues. And I've battled against obesity for a long time. I lost the same 75 pounds twice and gained the weight back, once in my teens, once in my 20s. And I just struggled with that. And then, starting at age 34, I got my act together and then I, lost the weight again. And I figured out a way to keep it off now for over 5 years. And the way I've done that is by just keeping on going, because in the past I'd set a goal and I reached the goal and I put my feet up and say, "Oh, did it, mission accomplished," right? And I kind of realized that you can't do that. You have to keep getting after it. So I just kept going to the gym and I, kept trying to push myself, make myself better, and got involved with endurance sports in 2019 and set a goal to complete an Ironman. And I just did that earlier this month, actually. It was about 3.5 years later, thanks to some delays with the pandemic and just a lot of struggles with that. but reached that goal, and now I'm working towards new things, and
Yeah.
trying to push myself towards new goals, because I realize that I just can't rest on the laurels of what I just did forever.
Right. Sure. Yeah, and that's a big reason I wanted to have you back on the show, is to talk about the Ironman, and we'll dive into that in a bit. But that's, first of all, it's just phenomenal to have completed that. I mean, just, and I think it's important for everyone out there to stop and celebrate victories, even if it doesn't maybe look exactly how we wanted it to, but um, or we envisioned it. But the fact is, just completing an Ironman. I mean, 10 years ago, did you think you could complete an Ironman, or you would?
No, and I would even say that as recently as 2019, when I was 37 years old, I was in pretty good shape then, right? I had lost weight, kept it off for a couple of years. I kept going to the gym. I lifted weights 4 times a week. I did high intensity cardio once a week, right? I walked 10,000 steps every day for years. So I was in very good shape at this point in
Hmm.
time. But I would have told you it was impossible for me to run further than about 5 miles, I'd say, right? Because I
Hmm.
just had these things anchored in my mind throughout my life of, running 3 miles. Well, that's really far. That's really hard, right? And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
5 miles, maybe, right? If I wanted to like kill myself, right?
right.
I could push myself like that, but I couldn't understand how I could ever maybe run further than that. So, really over these last 3.5 years or so, the evolution has just been, crazy, because what I've
Yeah,
realized is that a lot of what I was held back by was self-limiting beliefs,
yeah,
right? And there was a physical time when I couldn't have run more than 5 miles, perhaps most of my life. But after I got to that point where I was able to do it, well, I was really only being held back by my mind, right? And I hadn't
yeah.
actually come to appreciate the new sort of power that I had, or what my new reality was, or could be. And I was just stuck, looking at things from that same perspective that I had in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and that is one way I think you've seemed to be taking a different approach than a lot of sort of the fitness gurus out there, and maybe the wellness people out there. Even I guess wellness is bigger than fitness, but I just think the approach that you seem to be taking is a holistic, you know, spiritual, physical, mental, emotional,
Yeah,
nutritional, all of it.
yeah.
So, and we were talking beforehand that is really what you're focused on, is the holistic approach, and actually trying to make real change, not trying to make a quick buck or sell something here, to then retire overnight. It's not all about money, and for you, but then the flip side is the people you're working with, that they play a big factor, a big role in their own success. But so before we dive in a little bit more, kind of to the race itself and some of the adversity that you've gone through, um, just briefly describe for the listeners what your business model looks like, or what are you trying to accomplish from a coaching standpoint right now?
Yeah, so I guess in the long term goal, if I were to pick like a big goal, it would be to help solve obesity. That's obviously a huge long
Sure.
term problem, and not something I can do this week on Twitter, obviously, right? I've often said, if I could just write a Twitter thread and solve obesity, I would do it, and then I'd move on with my life and do something else.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not going to happen though. So, in the meantime, I try to work with highly motivated individuals,
Hmm.
and help guide them through the process, because
Hmm.
it's going to look a little bit different for everybody, right? And I don't
Hmm.
think just emailing somebody PDF full of instructions is going to be helpful, right? Because
Sure.
you can find all this information online. I figured it out. It took me
Yeah.
25 years to figure it out. I could really shorten the time frame for someone else. You could do it alone, obviously. There's no one
Sure.
saying you can't. But what I do with my clients is I sit down with them and I help formulate, a program that's going to work for them and fit into their life, because everybody has different life situations. Everybody, some people are older, they're heavier, some people have family obligations, work obligations, all these different things. So you
Yeah.
have to figure out something that is a sustainable plan for you, that will bring you results, increase your energy, right? And this is something that's going to have to evolve over time, because what you're doing on day one is not going to be what you're doing on day 100, and it's not going to be doing what you're doing on day 1000. It's
Sure.
going to be a constant evolution, but just really getting them moving in the right track, building up momentum, because as you build momentum, it grows, right? And even if progress is slow from the start, you're still making it just by kind of reinforcing those habits and learning how to build the mindset that's necessary to achieve long-term success.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone's body is different. Everyone's family, or professional situation is different. Everyone's goals are different. And then, but that's not ever static. It's dynamic, right? So, um, it's not a one size fits all answer. So you're working one on one with clients to meet them where they are and help take them, guide them where they want to go. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's pretty fair, right? And I try to empower people. We were talking about it a bit before too, right? I try to teach everybody that you have to become your own best coach, right?
Sure.
And you have to know how to treat yourself with unconditional love and treat yourself with compassion for when you're not making the mark, but also hold yourself accountable, right? And demand more from yourself and actually go out and execute that, right? And I think that's where so many people fall short and they struggle with that, right? They'll have a lot of negative self-talk. They'll judge themselves very harshly. They'll see themselves as a failure or not good enough, right? And that's not treating yourself with compassion, and that's not treating yourself with love, right? You're approaching your own self from a low energy state, and that's not going to help raise your emotional state. So you have to change the way you see yourself, but also be realistic that, hey, you need to actually do these things. You need to hold yourself accountable to what you're doing. So I help with accountability, but at the end of the day, we're the only ones that are there with ourselves 24/7, 365. And if we don't hold ourselves accountable, it doesn't matter how good your coach is, how supportive your family is, or anything like that. You're going to find the time and the space to do what it is that is potentially a destructive behavior if that's where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about your training and then your race for your Ironman. I know there's a lot more to just again, it's more to this than just fitness, but
Yeah.
let's talk about kind of the mindset and the approach you took to your training. So, when did you decide to do an Ironman, and what did it look like at the very beginning of your training process?
Yeah, so I'll even go back to like the summer of 2019 when I first joined the local pool and I got inspired. I had just read David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, and I got
Yeah.
inspired to do a triathlon. And I had never really swam much, only for a few weeks, and wasn't much of a runner, and I hadn't ridden a bike in 20 years. But I figured, hey, I can hop on a bike and pedal it for like 18 miles, right? How hard could that be? I was in decent shape.
Right.
So I did that first race, and that was really scary. That was hard for me. I only had 24 days to really train for it. I was riding a borrowed mountain bike that was two sizes too big for me. It was an ocean swim, and I really wasn't comfortable swimming, let alone in the ocean at the time. So
Wow.
I was actually way more scared and anxious before this race than the Ironman, and that came
Hmm.
down really to level of preparation and
Sure.
familiarity with what I was doing. So basically, following that race, I achieved it. Right, I got across the finish line. It left me wanting more because I didn't do really well in that race. I think I
Hmm.
finished like 29th out of 31st in my age group, right? And it was understandable, because I'm
Sure.
competing against people who really train for these things. But so I kind of wanted more. And then later that year, I was looking to sign up for another shorter race that was going to be held in June of 2020. And I waited 3 days to sign up for it. The signups were October 1st. And I set a reminder and I got it. And I said, I don't feel like doing this today. And I only waited 3 days. October the 3rd, I went on to sign up and it was sold out already.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, this whole thing I had planned now, I have to
Right.
figure out a new plan, right? And then, I decided there was an Ironman 70.3 event, which is a half Ironman, that was scheduled for that same weekend in June of 2020 down in Maryland. And I said, you know what? I don't think I could even do this. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to sign up and I'm going to try to do this. So I
But
trained all
I'm
through.
just curious because I'm in Maryland. Where was that?
It's in Cambridge. It's
Okay, yeah. So that's where my sister did, and I think I
yeah,
mentioned this. She did the Chesapeake Man
yeah,
years ago, and yeah, that was pretty wild. We went out to lunch. We watched her. Well, first of all, it was delayed 2 hours for the fog. Then we went out to lunch. Then we then we
yeah,
watched a movie. Then we went out to dinner. This whole time she's doing the Ironman, but
yeah. It's a
uh,
long one.
crazy. But so okay, so this was
Yeah,
half
yeah.
Ironman in Maryland, right?
Yeah, so I signed up for that, and I had a book, and I just started training pretty much constantly throughout the winter, right? And running, biking, and swimming a lot, and got myself into pretty good shape, and then got March came around. I was really ready to start doing
Hmm.
some intensive build up to the race, and then obviously the whole thing with the pandemic happened, and the pools got closed, and my gym got closed, and it caused all kinds of problems, and I just kind of kept training, and it seemed likely they were going to cancel this race, but I had to keep doing it because what if they didn't? I can't just show up and wing it. So they end up canceling the race, and then I postponed into another race later that summer. It was in Atlantic City, another half Ironman, and I just trained all through the summer, kept doing it, thinking the whole time, well, they're going to cancel this one too, probably, but
Hmm.
they didn't do it.
Hmm.
They didn't do it. Finally, they ended up canceling that race. So then I
Gotcha.
deferred into the Ironman 70.3 Atlantic City the next September. So September 2021, I
Hmm.
deferred until then.
Hmm.
I didn't really want to mess with a lot of earlier races because of all the issues from the pandemic and stuff. So I basically
Hmm.
ended up training for that one race for about 23 months.
Hmm.
So it was about from October 2019 till September of 2021. I ended up training for that Ironman 70.3. And then, from there, I had set a goal at the start of this process that I was going to do an Ironman and I was going to write a book about it. I had this epiphany while I was running through the woods one day, and Ironman Florida in November of this year made the
Hmm.
most sense since I was going to be moving cross country probably, and I didn't want to do anything earlier in the year. So February came around, and I basically trained for 38 weeks to get to the start of this race.
Yeah. So do you think you had the pandemic not happened, do you think you would have done the half Ironman and that would have been it?
No, no. I think at that point I had set the goal to do the full one, but my plan
Gotcha.
was to do. I was going to do two half Ironmans in 2020. Probably I was
Hmm.
probably going to do the one in Maryland and then the one in Atlantic City,
Hmm.
and then in 2021 I probably would have done like Ironman Lake Placid or something like that, just because I was in New Jersey at the time, and that was the
Hmm.
closest one to me. But
Yeah.
all that happened, and I had to put I had to put things on hold and push them back for a year, and it was a frustrating, it was a
Sure.
long few years, especially 2020. It was really demoralizing at times, but it taught me a lot, about perseverance and consistency. And by the time that race day did finally show up, I was much better prepared than I would have been otherwise. I had a whole extra year plus of training under my belt for it. And something like Ironman racing, endurance sports, it's not just the weeks leading up to the race or the month leading up to the race. It's the years leading up to the race, because it takes years to really be competitive at events like this, even if you
Hmm.
are gifted for it.
Sure. No such thing as an overnight success in probably
No.
anything. But so let's talk about the race itself. I know we spoke briefly about it, but um, I would guess that the race itself could be viewed as maybe a microcosm of the ups and downs of life. And there's certainly, I know you faced adversity in the race itself. So how did the race go? And yeah, just how did the race go?
Yeah, look, overall it went well, and it taught me a lesson in perspective, right? Because I can look at it from the perspective of where I was when I lined up for the start line, and I could say, all right, this didn't necessarily go as planned. I felt like I left some on the table, right? And I could have achieved my goal, of going faster on the race course, right? This is why I'm doing a race, right? It's to challenge myself and see how fast I can get from point A to point B. And it doesn't serve me to have the perspective of, man, 5 years ago you were fat and you couldn't even dreamed of like running 5 miles. Like look what you're doing, right? That doesn't help me in the race.
Right.
So, I lined up. I was extremely well prepared for this. I didn't really feel any anxiety whatsoever about it, just because, I knew what I was capable of. I had a pretty good understanding of how these things scale. I had nothing but confidence I was going to be able to finish the race,
Hmm.
basically due to my level of preparation. I've done, over 12 triathlons now, over 20 races, right? And I knew what I was getting into.
Sure.
There's always the possibility of the acts of God and stuff like that happening, right? Especially
Yeah, you
for
can't control everything. Right.
bike mechanical problems or injuries and stuff like that.
Sure.
So certainly getting to the finish line is a blessing. And I think 16% of the people who started the race didn't finish it,
Hmm.
right? So it's a challenging race for
Sure.
sure, but I felt really confident about it, and right, it started out. It was in Panama City Beach, Florida. It starts out with a 2.4 mile ocean swim, which went really well. I executed it on the swim pretty much perfectly.
Nice.
I had done a lot of swimming up to that point, and
Hmm.
a 2.4 mile swim sounds like a lot if you don't do a lot of swimming. But swimming is one of those things that it's easy to like scale that, and it's easy to swim that long in training. So I was able to swim the swim portion without exerting too much effort, right?
Hmm.
You have a long day ahead of you. And then after the swim, it featured a 112-mile bike ride through the Florida Panhandle, which is is challenging, right? And
Sure.
again, it's not people misunderstand these sort of races, and you're not necessarily exerting yourself at high capacity at any point during this race. It's a long race, right? This isn't
Hmm.
like trying to run your turkey trot 5K where you're just
Right.
run 3 miles. So it was a pretty measured effort, and I executed on the bike pretty well. I thought, and I think it did it in like 6 hours and 17 minutes. Took me a little bit longer than I was expecting to. It was about 18 miles per hour. Took me a little longer than I was expecting, but I was okay with that. And then you have to get off the bike and then run a marathon. Which
Yeah,
is
and I'll just chime in, and I'm because I've seen that transition,
yeah.
and again, haven't done it, right? But
Uh-huh.
just, I mean, these people have trouble walking, and now I'm sure that you loosen up, of course, right?
Yeah.
But I I've never run a marathon, let alone, I mean, you have trouble just walking, let alone running 26.2 miles.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so how did that go?
So it went okay. Again, it's a challenge to run after something like that, right? And I
Yeah.
had never ridden more than 100 miles before, so this was the longest bike ride of my
Hmm.
life. And so it's definitely a daunting proposition. You try not to think about, hey, I have to run a marathon now. It's more about like, what's the next step in front of me, right?
Sure.
Where's the next aid station, right? Like I just have to get to that aid station.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty much executing my plan. Okay, I had some gastrointestinal issues out
Mm.
during the run, because getting the nutrition piece of a race like this right is really important. It's going to
Hmm.
take 10, 12, 14 hours, so you have to make sure you're fueling well throughout the race. It's hot, you need to hydrate and stuff.
Hmm.
So I didn't nail that part of it 100%, but I was doing okay. And basically, as the race went by, I started to get a lot of pain in my lower back.
Mm.
My bike position probably not ideal.
Mm.
So that in a race of this length, these sort of mistakes
They
really
compound.
amplify.
Right.
And you can get by during a shorter race, right? But in,
Sure.
in, in a longer race, any mistakes you're making early in the day are really going to have a compounding effect. 8, 10
Yeah.
hours later. So my back started hurting, and running was a real challenge. So pretty much every mile there was an aid station. So I just packed the back of my suit with ice, and it would sit right above. I had a belt on holding my a water bottle, so it would just sit right above my lower back, and it would numb the pain for about the next half mile or so, and just be nice and icy, and then pretty much suffer for the next half mile, and then do it again,
Do it again.
and you do it again, and the ability I had to run, it became diminished as the race went. So I wasn't
Mhm.
able to execute the run itself the way I would have liked.
Right.
So I had to do a lot of walking just because I really wasn't able to run, and I wanted to make sure that I reached my ultimate goal, which was to finish, and that because I had done so well in earlier parts of the race, I was able to do that. You have a 17-hour time limit, so I finished 2 hours and 42 minutes ahead of that. So
Gotcha.
I was happy to do that, right? But it doesn't necessarily, you have this kind of
Yeah.
vision in your mind that you're just going to be running through the finish line. You're just going to keel over in exhaustion. Like, how did
Right.
I left it all out there on the course. It really
Yeah.
wasn't like that for me because my body didn't really hold up as much as I would say, conditioning and my spirit did.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, it's one of those, there's nothing, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. I mean, because you put so much
Yeah.
effort and training and time into
and
that.
and when you're in the moment, you're in a race, and there's
Yeah.
people passing you, and the object of the race is to beat them, right, and to get there
Right.
as fast as you can. So you have to be in that mindset during the
Sure.
race, and this is why it's
Absolutely.
important, right? Not just for Ironman racing, but I think for
Yeah.
everything that happens in life, right? To just get some perspective on how it went, right?
Right.
And don't just rely on your immediate judgments, how you feel in the immediate, aftermath of something happening or during it happening.
Yeah.
Give yourself some time, and the more significant the thing that happened, the more time you need to give yourself, right, to just zoom out and look at it from a
Right.
different perspective. And I think that's really crucial, and that's how we develop, and that's how we learn from our experiences, and that's how we grow, and we don't just react to them from our emotional perspective
Right.
as it happens.
Well, and one thing I've continued to learn, I guess, is the difference between reacting and reflecting. And reflecting has, you have more time and more space and just more perspective to be able to digest what happened. And it's a healthier, way of looking at things. But there's nothing wrong with trying to compete in the moment and do your best,
Yeah.
of course, right? So I think just changing the perspective, given the circumstances, is a skill that can be pretty valuable. Because, like you said, you shouldn't be looking big picture when you're just trying to get to the next, tree up there, whatever
Yeah.
it is, because that's not going to serve you well. But there is a time to step back when the race is over and kind of evaluate, hey, look, compared to where you were 3 to 5 years ago, it's amazing. I mean, and just, again, it's the whole, like, you were in the arena, you're actually doing it.
Yeah.
So nobody can say anything. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's super impressive for whatever, I know I have a competitive streak. I know I'd be a little bit disappointed if it didn't go the way I wanted it to, but it's extremely impressive. But
Appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah. So what's next? And I do have some more questions, but what's next with your own personal kind of fitness journey, if you will?
Yes, that's a good question. I have a marathon coming up at the end of January. I'm running
Okay.
the Miami Marathon, which it's I've run a marathon before, and I think I finished at like 4:05, right? So I was like, I was really trying for like 4 hours, so I
Got some
felt like
little
I
something
left
to prove.
a little bit on the table, but
Mhm.
running a marathon is pretty unpleasant. And I was like, well, I might never do this again. It's okay if I don't, but I have all this fitness built up, and it looks
Yeah.
like just a great race in Miami. You spend the first 11 miles running around Miami Beach and stuff. So
Gotcha.
uh, should be a good day. Hopefully my body can hold up to the pounding of all the training
Yeah.
that I'm doing, just because, it's been a long season for me. And then after that, I'm going to take a off season, because
Nice.
I train following a periodized approach, right?
Hmm.
It's not about just train, 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 train. So I
Right.
look at it kind of from a larger perspective of an off season, and then preseason, and then like actual race building.
Hmm.
Because when I was training for the actual race, I know you follow me on Twitter, you saw
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
right? I was doing, I was averaging over 15 hours per week for like 12 weeks of training.
Yeah.
but that's not sustainable for the
Right.
long term. And I never
Yeah.
expected it to be. It was more like, hey, let's just see if I can do this. It sounds crazy, but let's just
Yeah.
go through the process and see. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to an off season, and then beyond that, I don't really know what I'm going to
Hmm.
do, but I don't
Okay.
have to figure that out right now.
No.
It's a lot of these things you have to wonder, right? Like, I guess, what do you get out of doing it a second time or a third time, right? You
Sure.
obviously gain a lot going through an experience like that one time, but
Right.
then doing it the second time, how much additional do you gain for it? And third and the fourth, some people do this kind of habitually, which is,
Right.
which is, I mean, it's crazy in some ways because it's a lot of work and a lot of effort that has to go into that.
Yeah.
So I think it's what's the opportunity cost of doing something like that,
Sure.
right? Versus, hey, maybe if I spent my time and energy on something different,
Right.
I could grow it in a new way and expand it in a new way and not just try to do a really long triathlon a little bit faster. So
Right. Got it. So if you had to pick one of the three, is swimming your favorite, or which one do you tend to like
I
the
mean, I don't
most?
like any of them really. I mean, that riding the bike is great, but the bike is a big pain. There's all kinds of mechanical things, and it's just it's an expensive, it's a money pit and stuff. And
Mm.
plus riding here in South Florida is not particularly enjoyable for any number of reasons. But swimming is great. I especially love swimming in open water and being in the ocean, swimming like there. That's great, and that's some of my favorite like flow state activities. When
Mm.
you're out swimming in the ocean, it feels so good. And
Hmm.
then running, running is good too because it's easy. You just need a pair of shoes and you just put them on and go outside. And there's not a
Yeah.
whole, you don't have to worry about all the stuff you have to worry about the bike and stuff like that. So,
Right.
I try to find joy in them all because they all have positives, right? And that they all have some downsides. But this is one of the reasons I like training for triathlon so much is because you get to do different things and it's not just the same repetitive thing, right? Like even now with the marathon training, it is beating my body up running 5 times a week
Hmm.
compared to most of my season for triathlon. I'm only running twice a week, and
Mm.
I
Gotcha.
get to ride on the bike and I get to swim. So it's just you're doing different things and it's kind of healthier,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
there's benefits to them all for sure.
I see. And I've seen you talk about, for most people, walking, if they're not at a healthy weight, walking is probably
Yeah.
just as beneficial or more beneficial and healthier than running. Is that fair
Yeah.
to say?
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say. I mean, running is a great activity. It is, kind of the king of sports, I would say,
Hmm.
it gets kind of a bad rap amongst people in the fitness community, and I think that's because it's hard and they're not very good at it, in a lot of situations. But
Yeah.
obviously, it is impactful on our joints.
Sure.
When we're running, we're landing with 2.5 to 3 times our body weight with every stride,
Mm.
right? So if you don't have the sort of physicality to support your weight, then that's not
Hmm.
going to be a good idea. Plus,
Hmm.
most people who are overweight, they can't really run long enough to get a great cardiovascular benefit from it.
Hmm.
I can go out now and run for 2 hours and I'll burn a ton of calories, right? But going out and running for like 20 minutes, and you don't get the same effect and you're just kind of beating yourself up when you can just instead walk and
Sure.
actually enjoy yourself, right? And there's so many other great things you can do on a walk. You can, talk to friends or family, listen to podcasts, listen to
Yeah.
music. You take a work call. You can do all these different things when you're out, in nature under the sun. So, I think
Right.
for most people, that's the best place to start without a
Yeah.
question.
I love how you've incorporated the sun and nature and everything into your, I mean, essentially you're incorporating fitness into your daily life as opposed to, oh, I'm working out
Yeah.
really hard for 20 minutes. But um so I got a few questions here for you. And I don't recall, frankly, if I asked any of these last time, but what's one thing that people misunderstand about you?
I think a lot of people now they seem to misunderstand what my motives are. I guess kind of on social
Hmm.
media, and I guess they might see themselves in me. They might
Hmm.
be critical of me. And again, I'm not trying to make myself out to be any kind of saint, right? I'm trying to earn a living too. but
Hmm.
I mean, really, I'm just trying to help people, and
Yeah.
I think some people. I think some people who are really into the fitness community have some serious self-image issues,
Mm,
and they're insecure about that, and they look to fitness to kind of overcome that. And obviously, being physically fit is great, right? Adding
right.
muscle mass is great. Improving your cardiovascular fitness is great. It'll make you healthier. It'll improve your energy. All those great benefits, but it's not going to necessarily fix all your problems either. And if you have deeper sort of emotional problems, stuff that you've suppressed and repressed, it's easy, I think, to hide behind your physical form and say,
Mm,
well, look how great a shape I'm in, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm peak human specimen here, when that might really ultimately be a cope for some other issues that you're having, and
Yeah.
I think one of the ways I've gotten healthier is I've really kind of stopped caring about my appearance, and when I
Yeah.
got into this, I did it because, I want to look good, I want to be thin, I want to have a lot of muscle, right? And that's
Sure.
fine, that's
Right.
great.
Right.
But I get to the point now where I'm really more concerned about training for performance, and just being able to also enjoy my life, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
being able to eat to support my performance. And if that means I'm a few pounds heavier, then okay, who cares, right? It's not the end of the world. I don't have to be as skinny as possible, right? There's a
Right.
difference. When I was obese for all those times, I saw my fatness as my biggest problem. So I thought, well, if I could get as lean as possible, then that's going to
Yeah.
be my ticket to success. But once you get to a certain point, you start to see some diminishing returns on that. So, for the average person, if you're 15% body fat, or if you're 8% body fat, you're not going to necessarily be living that much of a better life.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Um, what would you say is one of your big, looking back on your 40 years, what's one of your biggest failures or setbacks or regrets?
I guess I would just say lack of self-belief, and that's really, I think, what held me back more than anything at certain points in my life. But there was a part of me that never gave up, and I think there's a part of everyone who never gives up, and I
Mhm.
certainly see that a lot in my clients, especially when they're new clients, right? There's something that compels them to say, "Hey, I need to turn this around." And I think that's
Sure.
in all of us. And I think a lot of people try to block that out, or, ignore it. I think it's there though. Because if you believe in yourself and you're committed to something and you show up consistently, you will be successful, provided the thing you're trying to do is somewhat reasonable, right?
Yeah.
If you just stay persistent at it and you keep showing up every day, you will be successful. And that really comes down to self-belief. So, I tell all of my clients before, any of nutrition, or how much you eat or exercise or any of that stuff, the most important part is self-belief. You have to believe that you can do this and that you will do this, because it all stems from that. So, that would be the one thing I would go back and tell my younger self. And but it's one of those things where talk is cheap. You have to earn it. You can't just say you believe in yourself. You have to actually produce some results that encourage it. So it's going to be a process, and it's going to you have to go through the process to do it, right? I lined up for the Ironman with self-belief, but when I
Hmm.
started the journey 3.5 years earlier, I didn't have that. I only got
Hmm.
to that point by doing the work and getting there.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. You need both. You need the self-belief, but then you need to support yourself so that you have increased self-belief, I guess. But I love that you take a very positive yet realistic approach to things. Um, so now, okay, so if you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would that be?
I guess probably like ground beef or something. I mean, at
Okay.
this point,
Yeah.
just because it works, right? Or a steak or something like that, maybe. I one of the kind of my, this is one of the great things about, the online kind of community, and on Twitter, there's a lot of bright people on there, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of really successful people. And they share what they do, and
Sure.
one of the great things about it is you get to see the process, right? And when I'm training for an Ironman, I'm trying to document the process. It's
Yeah.
one thing to look at a tweet and be like, oh, wow, look at this guy. He went from that to that. That's
Right.
amazing. but it's a whole other thing to follow somebody and see what they do day in, day out to actually achieve that result. So I
Yeah.
follow a lot of people on social media. They all seem to eat a lot of meat,
Right.
and they all seem to be pretty happy, pretty successful, pretty good looking.
Yeah.
So I can't help but think there's a strong correlation between that.
Sure.
And so I would definitely say, if I could pick and I'm not paying for it, I'll take a ribeye every night and
Yeah.
like
There you go.
like a baked potato.
Nice. So, who do you follow, if you don't mind? Can you share a few people you look up to or follow in the fitness and wellness community?
Yeah, Grimhood
Which
for sure.
what's that?
I said Grimhood for sure.
Okay.
He's a wizard with most things wellness, and his archive of tweets is a treasure trove that can solve virtually any health problem that anyone might
Hmm.
have. And I know of doctors on Twitter who said that they use his Twitter feed more than any other resource.
Wow.
Because of all the well documented research and stuff he's done. I was fortunate enough to do this Ironman along with a big group of guys. So they're awesome. Zach Homel's one of them.
Hmm.
Mike Donatelli. There's a bunch of them.
So
Adam Sikora. What's
Zach
that?
was it was the same. I knew he
Yeah,
did an Ironman. I didn't.
yeah.
I
Yeah, it was
wasn't.
all we all ended up pretty much doing the same race, and there was probably
Gotcha.
about a dozen people from kind of the online Twitter community
Nice.
who lined up and did the race. And it really was incredible. It was one of those things where at first I was like, man, I was planning on doing this myself, and now it's not going to seem interesting or special that if all people are doing this race, right? Like my whole year of kind of social media content was geared around to it. But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, it was hugely beneficial to have so many people that I knew doing it with, right? They really drive me through training because I wake up in the morning like, all right, gotta beat these guys, right? But then when you're actually out on the course, it's just a different vibe. And you just, you feel nothing but respect for all the other great athletes who are out there doing this. And you
Sure.
know what it takes just to even get to the starting line of this race. So at some point in the run, I got to stop and hug Zach or whatever, right? And
Nice.
stuff like that. It just gives you so much energy and it makes you feel so good. So, there's a ton of great people. Look, I would recommend if you want a good list of people to follow. I have
Hmm.
in my pinned tweet on my Twitter at Matt Izzo. There's a thread I wrote that has a lot of great accounts tagged in it, and then even just the list of people that I'm following for the most part. I would imagine most of those would be great influences for people because I try not to follow people on Twitter who are negative influences because I know how it programs
Yeah.
me. And I try to say, okay, well, who can I follow on this that's going to be a positive influence for me and it's going to help me grow and succeed and not,
Sure.
take away from my energy.
Yeah. I know you've talked about the mute function
Yes.
as well quite a bit,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it is. I mean, Twitter and the internet and all that is very powerful, can be very good or very bad, but you've got to take your own control of your own
Yeah.
life, really.
It's,
And
it's, it's an amplifier,
yeah,
and it can amplify the negative, but it can also amplify the positive. And, that's what I try to do. Right. And at the end of the day, like I said, talk is cheap. I think we lead by leading by example, right? So I tell people this all the time that if you want to make a difference in the world to help people get in shape, help people get fitter or whatever, the best way to do it is to lead by example and to be
hmm
inclusive and be supportive and to go out and document it on social media.
hmm
Because if you're living this lifestyle and you document it and you're supportive of other people will be gravitated towards it. Other people will find you. They will have questions for you. They'll be able to give you your feedback, right? And this can be a tremendous force of positive for the world. But just telling people to do it, it doesn't work. People ask me all the time about like their relatives and stuff. I'm like, telling them is not going to work. You have to just go out and show them and hope
sure.
that through your example and through your supportiveness and whatever that they'll be interested in doing it too.
Yeah, I can tell you that with kids, just telling them doesn't work. So,
Yeah, you got to
um,
do it.
got to do it. So, trying to think is, I guess what's an issue that you're facing in your coaching or your business right now? Because there's always an issue or a challenge. So what's your biggest challenge, or one of your biggest challenges with your coaching business right now?
Yeah, I think it's just really, figuring out how to spend my time and energy. Just because I'm one of these solo
Yeah,
pros or whatever they call them, right? So
sure.
it's pretty much just me.
Yeah.
And you can outsource help and things like that, but it's just how do I sort of, how do I allocate my time and energy, and what platform do I do it on, right?
Hmm.
And those sort of decisions are challenging because I
Hmm.
only have so much time and energy,
Right.
for this, and there's a lot of opportunity cost associated with that, and
Sure.
you end up spending you can end up spending a lot of time kind of getting bogging down on details, which as
Right.
someone running a business, it's hard to see the big picture, have the big picture hat on, and then also be the one who's the specialist,
Doing.
and
Yeah.
it has to do all the grunt work and spending
Right.
a couple hours researching how to solve this relatively minor problem. So
Sure.
that kind of stuff is sort of the biggest kind of obstacle I face. But I mean,
Yeah.
look, the way I see it is if I just keep putting out value and I just keep helping people, then running a business will be easy and making money off it will be easy because
Hmm.
that's it'll just be there, and
Right.
you put enough value out and you will get value back in return, probably even more than you end up putting out. So
Yeah.
that's how I see it, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned to you before, I do a little bit of mentoring myself with mortgage note investing, and my time there is directly tied to what I charge, right? So it's,
Yeah,
but if I wanted to scale just that, I'm only one person, so I can see why people go to the group coaching model, or the membership type thing, or even selling a book or a program or that kind of thing, just from a scale
yeah.
perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
I hope to kind of get to that point at some point. I like I said, like to help out over 1 million people lose weight.
yeah,
But I find a lot of benefit in the one-on-one coaching, and what I'm doing
yeah,
with that is trying to figure out, well, how do I how do I make this a scalable product, right?
sure,
How can I take what I've seen work and not work with other people, not just me, right? And how can I build that into a more scalable product, like a course or something like that, that'll
right,
actually provide some in-depth sort of knowledge and strategies, and then obviously reach people at different price points and things like that, and that's
sure,
also a great way to get people interested in higher levels of service too, right? So it
yeah,
works kind of as both something that helps and as a billboard.
yeah,
But I mean, I don't feel a lot of pressure to necessarily roll all this out ASAP. I
right,
think
sure.
I think Twitter is potentially poised for tremendous growth at this point.
Hmm.
So I can see it really becoming sort of a ubiquitous sort of app. So
Mm,
I think being on Twitter and
yeah,
growing on that platform now will keep people well positioned for the future.
right.
Who knows what's
Kind
going
of
to happen
funny
in the
how
short,
a
but
week or two ago people were talking about Twitter might be shutting down, and
yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I think that the long term intention is to just make this kind of like a one stop shop for
hmm,
everything, for all content, video, audio, right, shopping,
yeah,
all this stuff, and obviously the people in charge now is a visionary, right, and
yeah,
whether they'll be successful with that, I mean, who knows. But
right,
there's certainly the opportunity there that this is going to significantly grow. So
right.
in relation to my other answer, how do I allocate my time? I try to allocate most of it to Twitter because I really see it as sort of the most valuable platform.
Hmm.
And some of the growth on TikTok and stuff like that is
Hmm.
certainly interesting, but I don't know that there's necessarily the depth there that
Yeah,
people
sure.
are looking for, and that's kind of what my ticket is. I'm more kind of getting into the depth sort of thing and not just
Right.
superficial sort of things.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. So as we wrap up here, talk what could, if someone reaches out to you for coaching, what does that look like? What would they expect?
Yeah, so normally, we start out with an assessment call, right? And it's I like to talk to the person about their individual situation, right? And it's really based kind of around the pillars, the fundamentals. I call it the boulders, not pebbles approach, right? Worry
Hmm.
about the things that are the boulders.
Hmm.
A lot of people with this stuff get really bogged down in minor details, right?
Hmm.
How's your sleep? How's your nutrition? How's your exercise overall, right? You got to get these things in line before
Right.
you start worrying about some of the minor details like meal timing or supplements or stuff like that, right? Like,
Right. Right.
and change can be overwhelming. So I like to introduce it gradually, right? As something, hey, let's just do these few key things now. Let's make
Sure.
this a habit, see how it goes, and then let's evaluate how that went and add to it or change it or whatever kind of as we go. So it's a program that I like to say we build together, right? Because it's got to be
Yeah.
something that works for you in your life,
Sure.
and it's just about getting feedback about it, having regular kind of consultations, which I think is important, because the more
Yeah.
information I'm getting, the better, right? The more
Sure.
I can understand about how it's working for you in your life, the more I can make changes to help you or support you. So I try to keep a open dialogue, and have regular meetings, and then make changes kind of as it goes, right? And then it
Yeah.
starts out at 12 weeks, but I would think most people would be well served at doing it longer than that, because 12 weeks is not that long of a time frame to
Hmm.
make a significant sort of change, and
Yeah.
again, this is something that I want to, one of the things I struggle with. I don't know if you've ever if you've ever seen Alex Hormozy's
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
with like
he and
his
his
value
wife.
equation, right? But so he teaches a value equation I have
Uh-huh.
written down here, which is like the dream outcome times the perceived likelihood of achievement over the time delay and the effort and sacrifice, right? So
Okay.
people want things that are fast and easy, right? So
Sure.
if things aren't fast and easy, then it's going to prevent them from buying it, right? We all want
Right.
the instant results, but when I'm selling, it isn't fast or it isn't easy,
Yeah.
right? So what I need to demonstrate though is that the value, right,
Yeah.
the dream outcome is so astronomical, right,
Right.
that it is well worth this time and effort sacrifice that you have to make.
Sure.
So it's you can make great progress in 12 weeks.
Right.
You can start to feel better after a few days even, right? And start to feel better, but you're not going to achieve the results you want probably for months, if not years. And
Hmm. Sure.
that's just the reality of it. And
Absolutely.
nothing I can do about that.
So does it really vary per client as far as whether you focus on nutrition versus fitness versus sleep kind of thing, or does it seem to fall into one or two categories?
It definitely varies, because
Yeah.
different people are at different places, and have to kind of meet them where they are, like
Yeah.
a active 25-year-old is going to get a different plan than somebody who's, very overweight in their 60s, right?
Sure.
It's just kind of unrealistic to expect that sort of thing, but it's really all based around these fundamental pillars, and
Yeah.
seeing what works. This is an art and a science, right? There is no
Yeah.
kind of
Absolutely.
there is no easy plug and play answer, right?
Right.
And you're going to need to make changes as you go too. So it's going to be a constant evolutionary process. But again, I try to teach people these concepts themselves, right? So how
Yeah.
do you hold yourself accountable? How do you do this when I'm not around? Because I want people to have a lasting, sustainable transformation. Lose weight and keep it off for the rest of your life, right? And
Sure.
that's kind of what my end goal is with people, is to how do you get to that rest of your life part.
Yeah. I love it. Awesome. Well, you've obviously shown you can do incredible things. I mean, just the first episode where you've kept off you
Yeah.
lost the weight 3 times and then kept it off the third time. But I mean, even without the Ironman, it's just super impressive. So, and I love that you take, like I said, a realistic approach, but positive and encouraging. And clearly, you talk a lot about the self belief and principles, and not getting too bogged down into the details. So I just really love your approach, and would encourage anybody who's looking for wellness and fitness coaching to reach out to you. So
Yep, I appreciate that, and like I said, I try to work with a wide variety of people, right? If you're somebody who's looking for really specific stuff like that, I'm probably not the right person for you. I'm not the right coach for you. Like if you're looking to become an elite power lifter, then I'm not going to be the right coach
right.
for you.
Sure.
I'd be happy to recommend to other people who might be though, but if you're just a person trying to get more energy, trying to feel better, trying to lose some weight, trying, to have the energy to like play with your kids, or, just restarting an exercise habit, these are the sort of people that I'm working with a lot. And, this is kind of, I think, where the most people need help, in terms of how do you integrate a healthy lifestyle into your daily life that's busy and full of responsibilities. That's such a challenge in today's world. Our
Yeah.
lives are all so complicated, right? And
Yeah.
I want to help you try to figure out, well, how do I maximize this? How do I feel better? How do I lose weight and kind of become the best version of myself, or at least a better version of myself?
Sure. I love it. Awesome. So other than Twitter, is there any other place people can reach out to you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram, Matt Izzo Fitness, and I think TikTok too,
Nice.
Matt Izzo Fitness. I do a weekly newsletter, so you
Okay.
can sign up for that. I have a link on all my social media pages. I have both a fat loss guide and a recipe guide, so you can get either one or both of those for free too if you want to sign up for my email newsletter. I try to add value once a week. It's one of these things that I get a lot of people approaching me, these ghost writers and stuff. They'll DM me and they'll
Uh-huh.
try to sell me newsletter marketing stuff, and I'm like, the last thing I want to do is read spam, right? The
Sure.
last thing, I hate email marketing, right? So I don't want my email newsletter to be just a
Yeah.
marketing flyer, right? I'm going
Sure.
to mention the things I'm doing and any offers I have for sure, but
Right.
there's a substantive message behind it. And because
Right.
I feel like that's important, because you don't want to just open an email written by some ghostwriter trying to sell you something. I don't want to read
Sure.
that, and I'm sure
Yeah.
my readers don't either. So
No, but
it's just
and I've heard a recent podcast on this topic, and we don't have to dive in too far, but it's he talked about the more emails I send, the more money I make, but the caveat was it has to be good email, like
yeah,
it has to be quality. The thing is, though, people do still read email, and if they choose to be a subscriber of yours, then they do want that email,
yeah,
and they're not going to typically commit on Twitter to signing up for a program. They're going
yeah,
to do that through email or
yeah,
phone call.
yeah.
So it's a little more
That's
private, but
Yeah, that's why I think it's important though that it offers value, right?
sure,
And that it
exactly.
actually be from me,
Exactly.
not
Right,
just
right,
from
right,
some ghost writer who's
right.
going to put a bunch of generic fitness stuff in there. That's not
Sure.
what I'm trying to offer.
No, you're very authentic and looking for real impact to really help people change in a positive way. And that part is obvious. So yeah, Matt Izzo, thank you so much for spending another hour with us. Really appreciate this. So I'm very curious to see, follow you and see how things go in the future. Part of me wanted to fly down to Florida and watch the race, but
I appreciate that, but from what I hear, these Ironman races are very boring. I've never actually watched one myself, but it's a long day. I felt yours and everybody else's energy. I have to say, the support I got and the love I got from the community. I mean, it's so great. I was down there at the race. I had some people stopped me and told me that they've been watching my YouTube channel where I was documenting this, and that's just really cool, and just knowing that there's so many people out there rooting for you and cheering for you. And it really makes kind of, it makes it for me, and I think there's just so much value in supporting, not just me, but these regular people who are
Mhm.
achieving these sort of challenging things.
Sure.
Just I mean, it's great to root for elite athletes, the
Right.
pinnacle of this, but just to see these regular people, and for me to even participate in something like an Ironman race, which is going to be the highest level of competition I'm ever going to kind of participate in my life, right? It's just being out there with these people who are pushing themselves to the limit. It's just such a privilege, and I really support everyone who's doing that, and everybody who's just getting out of their comfort zone. It's going to look different for everybody. It might just be walking around the block for somebody on that first day, right? And that's
Sure.
great, right? Just keep going, and be supportive of people doing that stuff, and it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the positive energy. And we'll look for your the book that you promised yourself
Yeah, some
that you
point.
would at some
I
point.
actually I sat down and I wrote the first 12 paragraphs
Okay, nice.
this
Well, I mean,
morning.
if
So
you're
I guess
doing a
I'm
weekly
started.
newsletter, you've got maybe the
Yeah,
start to it. So,
yeah. Guess I'm started.
well, thanks a lot, Matt. Really appreciate your time.
All right, thank
Um,
you.
and to the listeners out there, we also appreciate your time, which is your most valuable resource. Thanks, everyone. Take care.